Well, we can go ahead and get going here. My name's Kim Downing. I'm the general manager here, so I'm glad to see everybody here. This is our first in-store demo, and we're doing a whole bunch of these all through next spring. So we got a lot of great ones coming up. This is my counterpart, Dennis Kennedy. Dennis and I do a lot of video together here at the store, different woodworking tips and stuff. And then Dennis has been responsible for helping to get the store put together and kind of a jack of all trades, so we're lucky to have this guy. But Dennis and I did our first Ecopoxy table, what, three and a half years ago?
It's this one here. This is what we did.
We really didn't know what we were doing, but we got lucky on a few things, and it ended up turning out pretty well. So ever since then, Ecopoxy's been a strong product for us, and Dennis has done all kinds of stuff. He's just kind of taken the ball and ran with it, and he's created clocks and tables and coasters, and so he's going to be the expert today, and I'm sort of his crash test dummy, so to speak. So anyway, so let's go ahead and get started, Dennis.
So, fun fact, just a fun fact, Kim doesn't know this, but next Friday, it will be 20 years that I've known him and we've worked together. So, he and Becky over at the cash register. It's been fun.
Congrats.
Yeah. Fun fact for me. It's good. But anyway, I'm not an expert and I'm not a scientist, but what I am is interested in the process and excited about all the possibilities that it provides. So what we thought we'd do today is I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about epoxy. We've got a mold to pour and we got one to break apart. So we'll talk about these epoxies. We'll break that mold apart, and then at the tail end we're going to pour this. So
And hope for the best.
And absolutely hope for the best.
And we do have plastic down in case we have a leak.
Exactly. Make sure you have plastic.
And maybe even on the floor too.
Oh, buddy. It can get messy, but it'll be okay. So we have Ecopoxy Flowcast.
We start out.
And there's SPR. I think that SPR stands for slow pour resin. And it's been out a couple of years, and I really love it. This mold is poured with that SPR. What we're going to do today is actually going to use the Flowcast. And the difference between the two that I can see is the SPR, the resin is just a little bit thicker than it is on the Flowcast. And I think that's, again, I'm not a scientist, but I think that has to do with heat and purity. So the SPR, that is if you're going to pour from 1/4 of an inch up to an inch and no more than 3 liters, you can use that. They don't recommend it for big pours and nothing more than an inch. So the nice thing about that is if you're doing something like what we're doing here today and those coasters, stuff like that, I really love that SPR. Because what I find is that it provides less bubbles. There's less bubbles you got to remove. So
plus the other thing I'll just point out too is that, when we did this table, we really didn't know what we were getting into right off the bat.
Yeah, I didn't.
So if you're thinking about doing an Ecopoxy project, maybe start off with a small coaster and a small kit, just to kind of get your feet wet, and before you get into doing some monster table or something.
Yeah, well, you stole my thunder there, because that was my next line.
Sorry, Cream Puff.
But exactly, if you're going to do something, do yourself a favor and start small. Because when we did this table, I had never done it. He actually did it. I just asked 1,000 questions. But I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do a sofa table. In my head, I'm just sofa table, sofa table, sofa table. So I got my plank, my slab, I cut it up, made my mold, and I was less than 24 hours from pouring, and I thought, Dennis, what are you doing? Act like you got a brain. And so what I did is I took that cutoff from that slab. It was about 3 feet. I cut it in half, and I made 2 small tables to start with. And I am so glad I did. And that small table there, that's actually the first one that I ever did. And I got lucky. It turned out it's actually my favorite that I've done so far. But anyway, just start small. You learn so much and you figure out so much of the process by just doing that, and you don't have near the pressure on you. Because one thing you don't want to do is buy a big slab, or heaven forbid, you take that slab of walnut that was harvested out of your grandfather's timber and think you're going to build a table with it, and then it doesn't turn out. I mean, what a tragedy. So just start small. Did I
Good point.
belabor that?
No, you're good to go.
So again, the Flowcast, they recommend that at, I believe it's 1/4 of an inch up to 1.5 inches. And I think it's no more than 30 liters at a time, but it's for bigger pours. I've not done that big a pour. Biggest one I've done is that sofa table, which was 52 inches and 14 inches deep. So I don't have any experience in those big, massive tables, but
like on this one, it looks like we've got about 1.5 inches in thickness, so we'll use the regular Flowcast
yep,
grid, right?
exactly, yeah. I don't know what had happened. I mean, I know what will happen or can happen is when I was pouring this, I had a little bit left over, so I just dumped it in here, just did. So that's actually SPR, and of course that's what 2 inches or over. Didn't crack the glass.
Sure.
But I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I don't recommend it. So anyway, let's get on. Temperature and humidity are important. They recommend like 68 to 77 degrees.
So pretty controlled environment.
Yeah, and not high humidity. So I started out, I was doing mine in my garage, and I've got a heated garage, but it's not like your house. I mean, I can get it up to 72, but it doesn't stay there. So anyway, I had a couple of fails when I was pouring out in the garage, and it had to be because it was probably not the humidity the factor, but the coldness. It was just too cold. So I now pour in the basement is what I do. I've got room for it, so that's what I do. And there's no real odor to it, so that's not an issue.
So as an example, the one that failed in the garage, he had one end up close to the exterior door, the overhead door, and the other end closer into the shop. Well, the one end hardened and the other end turned into jello. It never did harden.
It actually hardened on the top, and I thought it was cured, and then as soon as I popped that mold off, it just started to run like Caro syrup. So it never cured. So temperature and humidity are important.
Let's talk about the difference between the dyes and the metallics real quick.
Yeah, and then it's perfectly clear when you mix it. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts resin, 1 part hardener, and it's clear as you mix it. So actually it's cloudy as you mix it, and once that's clear, it's pretty much good to go. But you can color that with any kind of pigment you have. And what I like a lot is the metallics. They have glitters, but I haven't tried those, so I can't really tell you one thing or another on glitters, other than I've got to believe they're going to sink, but I don't know. But the glitter, or the metallics and stuff, that's fine, because if you look at these samples in those coasters, and that charcuterie board and stuff, that's all got metallic mixed in.
Including this one, right?
Yep, yeah, that's just left over from that
So
there.
this one's just metallic only. There's no dye in that. So you do get a lot of color from it.
You do. And I used to use quite a bit of pigment, but I find myself using a little less pigment and just depending on the metallic to generate the color. And I'm kind of liking that because it ends up that the epoxy is just a little more translucent. So, and I'm liking that look right now, so that's what we do.
Move on to molds.
Yeah, the molds, this one's made out of Baltic birch, and that's because that's what I had in the shop, and I had a piece of scrap that wasn't good for anything else, and we didn't have any MDF at the time, so I made it out of Baltic birch. But what I really like to use is 3/4 inch MDF, because it's dead flat, easy to work with. And when you're sizing your mold, I'd suggest probably on your inside dimensions, you want that length at about 1.5 inches more than what you want your finished length. And I would give yourself about 1/2 inch on the width. Because what you're going to find when you when you pop that out of the mold is, your edges, your ends they're going to be harder to
Clean up.
clean up, yeah.
Because like on these tables that we did, those were about 1 inch longer, wouldn't you say?
I
And
think
then
it was.
we came back after we popped it out of the mold. You'll see it when we pull this one out. And we basically trimmed those ends. So you want a little bit of leeway.
Give
on
yourself a
those
little,
ends.
and I say that because I just poured a couple of tables in the last couple of weeks, and I think I gave myself about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. And I don't know what happened, but it's always going to happen on these ends where it's, when I trimmed it, I had to trim more off both ends than I wanted to, so my table ended up shorter than I wanted it to be. So then I put edge banding around the whole thing just and called it a look. But my point is make sure to give yourself a little leeway, especially on the length. The width, I don't think will be too much of an issue if 1/4 of an inch, because you're just going to shave, you just need to shave off the sides. And on the molds, I always like to cut my base wider and then screw through the base into my sides. It's a personal preference, but to me, it's like when you do that, the seam is horizontal instead of vertical, and it just seems like there's that epoxy. It's got to go this way, then it's going to go down. But if it's the other way, then it's just shooting right on down. So it's just a head thing, but that's what I do. And with the MDF in particular, I reuse those molds all the time, so I just mark them, side A, and then I can just redo them. And all. You'll see some of that as we pop that mold off of there.
What do you trim it with?
I'm sorry, what?
What do you trim? What do you use to trim your?
You can use like an edge guide with a circular saw. We actually used like a track saw. But you can use that miter, depending on what your width is, you can use the table saw. Actually, I think we used the table saw on that one.
We did.
Along with the sled.
Just a universal blade into.
Yeah.
It was. I actually, on mine, it's a woodworker too.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and you're probably going to get just a little bit of chipping.
Okay.
Just a little bit. So you're almost always probably going to either round that over just slightly and then sand. But you're probably going to get a little chipping no matter what you do.
But it cuts easy. It cuts just pretty much
It
similar
does.
to wood.
Yeah. I just cut it, just like I would a regular piece of stock. I don't bag it or just.
Thread right through.
Yep.
Kids.
We have an in-feed table that we use, and I find that pretty good to use because it gives me that. For the tables that I do, that in-feed table gives me just enough room to pull my sled back, get her on there, and push her through. So, as far as molds go, you'll see that I actually cut these at 3/4 by 3/4, and the reason I did that is because sometimes you get this thing all clamped down and everything, and then you realize, well, I need to check level again. So if it's 3/4 and 3/4, then I can. Basically, I'm pretty good to check level on that, and you want it you want it as absolutely level as you can get it because it's liquid. It's gonna.
So one thing you want to point out too is that the reason that these are clamped down is this Ecopoxy is just like water.
Oh yeah.
So when you pour it in, those pieces are going to float.
Yeah.
So you got to keep them clamped down.
It'll lift up.
Yeah.
And I tend to cinch them down just a little tighter. I'm not just because I don't want them to float, but I'm trying to keep as much liquid out from underneath that board as I can. So I clamp them down fairly tight, and I got shims here. Those pennies, a lot of times at home I can shim with a penny and it works pretty good.
Well,
for
these
me.
are kind of interesting too, Dennis. He's cut some blocks for that whole thing to set on, and that way he can get the clamps underneath and not have that thing flopping around. So.
Yeah, and that works out with these clamps. It's like an inch and a half or something like that, and that was just enough to get these clamps through there.
So when we did our first one, we didn't have all these parts made. we poured it and they floated, and then we went and made parts and got it all under there, and it was kind of a mess. So the preparation is the key. If you get everything prepped, you got a solid plan, you can dry clamp it just like you have here, then you're good to go.
Pouring is the pretty part, but all this other stuff this is where it's at. So take your time and get this done. It just so happens, and this is the first time it's ever happened for me, so lucky me.
So you try to get the center of the board you're working with to clamp it down so it's kind of even like pressures. You have certain place you put the clamps.
It just needs to hold it
necessarily, but it just needs to hold it down and wherever you think it needs, because I just like it as tight as I can. And I've cut these so that they're pretty snug in there, so that there's very little area for liquid to go.
Right.
But at the same time, you want to be careful when you do that, because you don't want to scarf up that tape. And here it goes. Because Kim says that I'm going to say this.
Dennis talks about tape all the time.
12 times today. I don't think I will, but he says I am. But if you remember nothing else, the tape is the absolute holy grail of this whole thing. I don't have stock in it, but believe me.
You should have stock in it.
And I say that with a little bit of experience because Ecopoxy also has a tape, and they sent us a roll of tape, and I tested it on a couple of projects. And I guess it's like tuck tape with their logo on it. So if you know what tuck tape is, because a lot of YouTube videos tell you to use tuck tape. Well, I used that tape, and it worked great. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. Loved it until I had to. Like I tell you, I reuse my molds. So I remove all that tape and then start the process over. Well, you could not remove that Ecopoxy tape.
Well, if I
you tear
recall-
it, it would just rip and splinter and spider web out. And
that tape's a lot thinner than this.
it is. It did its job. It held that Ecopoxy, but it just, you can't remove it.
So you guys
So-
will notice we had this block here, and this one, when we poured it, it wasn't quite level. So some of this Ecopoxy towards the end kind of spilled onto the surface. So these two blocks sort of got partially submerged, and I just knocked it off, and that tape, it's still in good shape and everything. So tape
Oh.
is
What is the
big
brand
deal.
of tape again?
It's sure tape.
Sure tape.
Yep. It's the best $12 you're ever going to spend. So now he's going to pull this out of that mold.
When I walked in, I thought you would be pouring another layer of clear onto that. Would you?
Well, we might be. You could. We talked about that because one thing that this one did I thought was kind of interesting. The first one we poured, the epoxy is flush with the top. So what that meant was we had some sanding to do because as much as you can pour that epoxy up to the top, it tends to seep down a little bit because it's seeping underneath and to the ends and everything. And this stuff takes 3 days to set. So if it's going to saturate into anything, it's going to drop a little bit. Well, this particular one dropped quite a bit, which is kind of a neat look in a way. It's like all shiny and stuff. So we were talking the other day, we could just lightly sand this top and then use like a UV coating over the top, like a UV finish, and just leave it, to where it's not perfectly flat. Otherwise, you'd have to surface all this either with a sander or a thickness sander.
And that's
or
what
something
I've
like
always
that.
done. You know, and I kind of forgot to mention, like that the SPR, like I told you, it's a quarter of an inch up to an inch. And at an inch, it'll cure in about 48 hours. If it's a quarter of an inch, it'll take about 72 hours. So, and the flow cast, that's 72 hours, I'm sure.
Well, and talk about spray too.
Yeah. So the red tape is that's what it's all about. But we've also, I always use a little bit of the silicone spray also, and I'll just spray the mold with that. And I've never had any trouble with anything coming out of a mold.
Yeah, why
And before you pop that, just
About that.
yeah. So if you see right there, that's where that epoxy tried to get away, and that tape just won't allow it. I think there's another one on the other end.
Yeah, there is. Where it
So-
seeped through.
Yeah. So I always wrap these. This has been wrapped twice around the perimeter, and then one of those wraps is right here so that I can fold it underneath because my screw holes are under there, and I want those plugged, making sure. I always put an extra little bit on the corners because that's where it's leak. The other thing I do, they tell you to use silicone caulk. I've never had any luck with that. It doesn't stick to the tape.
No, and we actually did that on the first table, and that was kind of a mess.
It was. And one time I tried, I thought I would try, so I put a line of caulk on the other side of the board, and then I clamped it in. Seemed like it maybe would work, but all it was a mess coming out.
Do you join your corners together on your board?
No, there's just butt, yeah. And that's why I just give it an extra wrap of tape.
Rip it.
Well, the one thing
The other
that's
thing that happened is if we weren't doing this as a demo, I'd break those sides off, and then I'd leave it on that base, and I'd run it through my sander
to screw it.
because it's flat. So that's where I'd start. Once I get that top surface sanded, then I just take it out and then I sand the other side.
So when you taped this, Dennis, one thing that's interesting is you taped the bottom first,
Oh yeah,
and then he pre-taped all these pieces, screwed it together, and then he taped the inside corners again.
Making sure it's
So it's like
well what I
three
did,
layers of
what I
tape
did
on those
is
corners.
since the caulk doesn't work, I just take a strip of tape, and it's an 1.5 inches wide, and so I take it and I try to get it and I try to sweep it from side to bottom, and I just take my
Same.
ruler and I just slide it down there and I just tuck that into the corners. So now I've pretty well sealed the length and the sides, and the weak spot is the corners. So I just give those an extra wrap of tape, and it's always worked for me.
So one trick that we're gonna do here is we tend to use this doesn't want to come off of this very easy. So a lot of times we try and use these shims to tap down in there.
Find a weak spot. There might be a weaker spot there.
Right there.
It's looking like it.
Have to grab the chisel.
Check with them.
One thing I didn't bring was a screwdriver because I never really needed it.
Oh, it popped right off.
So now what you're seeing is the fact that there's that wrap I'm talking about. And to be honest with you, that's a pain.
Pass it
It
around.
isn't any fun, but
Careful, it's a little sharp.
I don't have any epoxy on my table.
That
So,
looks a lot easier to tear apart
life
your
is
building.
good. So the other thing you'll see is that I've about a third overlap on that tape. That works pretty well too. And this actually, you can actually see, this mold is one that I've used over and over again. It's one that I used that epoxy tape on to begin with. So
Well, it popped right off, Dennis.
there you go. Life's good. Did you, did you pass that other one around?
Yeah, they're gonna take a close look at it, so. Like I said, it's a little sharp here and there.
The
so
other
be
thing you
careful.
notice is that on the underside, I taped that. Did you take that tape off? Wasn't there tape on the underside of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I did.
I always tape the underside of those boards just because sometimes I don't know for sure what's gonna be I think the one, that's the good side, and then the bottom is the bad side, but that hasn't always been the case, so I always tape that bottom, and then I sand both of them as if they're gonna be the side. And then because sometimes I've changed my mind, but that's why that's taped. And the other thing I could do, we didn't want to do it for this demo, but sometimes if I'm getting nervous and for whatever reason, I will actually tape the tops of those boards with that red tape. So we didn't want to do that because we wanted you to be able to see the lumber, but
We did that on the first one we did. We
Yeah.
masked that whole top off, and I believe, if I remember correctly, you were using masking tape,
yeah.
and the masking tape sort of saturated it, and that didn't work very
Yeah, it
well,
didn't
so.
work good.
Now, one thing you're gonna find, you're gonna have to sand these things, so if you have,
Burn through a planer?
yeah, you can. I actually ran that one through a planer lightly, just real light passes, and it just kind of shaves off, just, like lumber does, so. it
My
works.
experience wasn't that.
Because I use a card scraper, and it takes forever.
Yeah, well, I ran one through a planer one time, and it went through and immediately nicked those 3 blades, and I don't know, it frustrated me, so I don't do that anymore personally. But what I do is I run that through the drum sander I have an 80 grit, and I'll run that through until, because I always have it so that it's flush. So I'll run it through until it's flush, and then I'll sand from, it's 80 grit going through the drum sander, and then when I go to sand it with the orbital, I start with 60 and go up 80, 100, 120, 150. I don't really skip grits when I'm doing this. Going up to 220 or 320. And by the time you get to like 320, your epoxies, it's looking good again, because it's pretty grim when you're sanding it. But it shines up good. And then a lot of times I'll take, I have those, I think it's Abernet or Merca foam pads. And I have a 500, 1,000, 2,000, and a 4,000. And sometimes I'll just put those on the orbit sander and then just kind of don't hit the wood so much, but just the epoxy, and that'll polish it up just even a little bit more. But you'll never get that to look like right as we poured it there. Once you run that through a sander,
Oh, no, you'll never get it.
get it.
Is this
to
what
be-
you're talking about
Yep,
for
yep.
the finish? So these just stick to there's a pad that goes in between here, so these just stick on a 6-inch sander, so.
Yeah.
One other quick little tip we did, since we didn't want the thickness to change too much on that first table, we would strike a pencil line across the whole thing, and then sand, strike a pencil line, sand. That way you can kind of be accountable for how much stuff you're taking off, so.
Could you put a real thin layer, after you got it done sanding, a really thin layer to get that good look at the end?
Absolutely, I think
They would
so.
bond together, the 2 layers.
In other words, if he didn't sand all the way down to the epoxy, but just sanded the wood, is
You
what
just
you're
got to
talking
scuff
about.
the epoxy a little bit to get it to stick.
Yeah, to get it to stick.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've done that.
Then you have a final
got to have a little
finish.
bit of tooth to
Then you
it.
have a final finish that's really
Mhm.
Yeah.
looks like it.
You ready to do a little mixing?
Well, I was thinking there was something I was gonna
Well, I think
reiterate
the
on that.
biggest thing is when Dennis and I did our first one, we didn't have these blocks made, we didn't have these spacers made. It wasn't quite level. So the key to success here is just preparation. You just got to think about every little thing that can go wrong and make sure you got all your blocks made, your clamps ready, your spacers, everything's taped off.
Yeah.
We talked about the silicone spray.
Yeah. I think what I didn't say on the SPR is that where this will take 72 hours to cure, if this is meant to cure in about 48 hours if you pour it at an inch deep, and it takes about 72 hours if you pour it like at a quarter inch deep. So maybe that's important to you, and that as far as time goes, it never really affects me because most of the time this stuff stays in a mold for 4 or 5 days before I get to it. You know how life gets in the way.
And I know what else we forgot to talk about before you mix your epoxy. A lot of these live edge pieces and stuff will
that's right.
have like pieces of bark or loose things. So you got to remove some of that because the epoxy wants to saturate into the wood. That's kind of how it grabs a hold. So if you've got a bunch of loose bark and stuff, it's probably going to break off, or it could break off. So you take the sander and go all over those edges. We even, if we've got a lot of debris, just take a wire brush to those edges, and that just gives the epoxy a good way
It
to
does,
adhere.
because you kind of want that to have some tooth to it. So I'll take, like that piece over there had a lot more bark and stuff on it, so I took a chisel to it. Anything that had any movement to it at all, thank you, I chiseled it off. And then I took the random orbit sander and I just kind of scuffed through the whole thing. Then I sucked all the dust off. And then I took the wire brush to it, and I put a little pressure on that, so I want that to make sure that it's breaking everything off that can be broke off. And then I just clean it again with the vacuum, and from there you hope it works.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about this one, and we can tip it up to show you, just because these are done with live edge, these two pieces are live edge, but then this piece we just cut on the bandsaw. We just wanted a piece in there. We weren't going to do that.
No, but we thought
just-
it was just a bit more epoxy than we just thought it'd look
We
better.
thought it'd be neat with an island in the middle. We even tapered this end, or it's going to go down sort of into the river a little bit. So I think that'll be kind of interesting. So you can just
And
use
that's-
your imagination.
You bet. That's
there.
part of the fun of the whole thing is. Now, do we have to re-level that?
You might want to check it while I do this. I'll go into this and you relevel. He's always fixing my mistakes, right? So this is a 2-to-1 product. So you've got a resin and a hardener. So 2 parts resin, 1 part hardener. It's a good idea to get an oversized bucket. We just go on ahead and figure out how much you need. And you can do that by just doing some rough measurements on the volume. Get an online calculator to tell you liters and all that stuff. And then this will show you, the 2-to-1. And this one we need 2,100 milliliters. So we've pre-marked, the resin goes to A and then the hardener goes to B. And that way you're not making any mistakes and wondering how much you mix. So.
And it's kind of a guesstimate, so, you just got to take a measurement or 3 or 4 measurements and see kind of what your width is, and it's width times depth times length. And I think he said 2,100 milliliters, so I went long. Should be around 22 or so there or something, I think. Because you kind of want to, it's a lot more fun if you get it right, but you kind of don't want to be real long, and you really don't want to be a little short. A little short is less fun than being a little long.
Well, and you can, we were suggesting too that you're always probably going to have, you go a little long, you're always going to have a little bit left. So like those coasters, you could pre-make a little project or something, and whatever you have left over, just go ahead and pour it in that,
And you could pour it in a glass.
like Dennis did. His pencil holder.
pencil holder. When I was doing the one from this morning, the blue one, I did that. I overmixed, and so on a wild hair, I thought, well, I'm just going to fill that glass and see if it works. Because I told you that SPR is for 1 inch deep. Well, don't tell Ecopoxy, but I mean, it worked.
So how long are we mixing for? 5 minutes?
Let me get one. Yeah, you want to mix for 5 minutes minimum, and then what I usually do is mix for about 4.5 minutes, and then I'll start mixing pigment and metallics in there, and then mix more.
So there's one thing my dad taught me, who's sitting here right now, about mixing epoxy. Because we're both boat guys, and we use West Epoxy like it's going out of style. If you can find a container that has a square bottom without a rounded edge, it's real important as you're mixing epoxy to make sure and scrape all those edges and scrape the bottom, because you want to make sure it's all mixed up. So thanks, Dad, for the tip. And you can get a paddle mixer. Ecopoxy makes a mixer that will fit into your drill to mix this up. You can go a little bit faster. But there's mess involved with that too. You got to clean the paddle mixer, and it can fly everywhere.
I can imagine. I don't use
It's a big old
that.
mess.
That's how I mix. And usually I like a container that's maybe twice what I need, rather than mixing 700 milliliters in a 750 milliliter container. It's a lot more fun to not spill.
No mask required?
No, and actually that's another point. I used to pour in my garage quite a bit, and my garage is heated, but it's not heated like the house. So I've had a couple of fails because my garage was too cold, and probably didn't have anything to do with the humidity at that time, because I think it was just too cold in there. So now I pour in my basement, which, they recommend 68 to 76.
Kind of a narrow window, really.
Yeah, 77, 68 to 77. So my basement fits that, and there's no smell, so.
Yeah, he poured one. He told me a story about one he poured in the garage, and he had one end. It was in the wintertime. He had one end
Yeah.
up by the overhead door that was closed, and then the other end was closer into the shop. Well, one end set up, and then the other end
The other end didn't. It
So
looked
it's just
like
too
it was
cold.
cured, and then when I popped the mold, the sides of the mold off, that far end, it was some coasters. And that far end, the net next to the garage door, it ran out like Karo syrup, kind of. And so it had kind of formed on the top, a top layer, but then it didn't cure all the way
Oh,
down.
what about plastic?
Yeah, plastic is your friend. My bench top is now a 1/4 inch higher than it used to be. And I'll tell you what I did, so you know. I was doing some coasters, and it was early on. I was really just starting out. And so I routed some 3-inch diameter pockets in, I don't know if it must have been half or 3/8 inch lumber. But I routed it at about half the thickness of the lumber. And so I was doing 3 different boards. And so I had them on my bench, and I leveled them, and it's just perfect. They're level. And then I'm getting ready to pour, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, well, where's the plastic? And then I think, well, don't need it. They're contained. I'm not going to need the plastic. I'm going to be okay. I don't need to re-level it. So I take the easy way out. So it's all good until right up in this corner here, and it was actually some zebra wood, just so you know. It was some zebra wood that I was gonna pour that epoxy in. Well, I did, and sure enough, what ended up being is when I routed that pocket, in that one particular pocket, there was some stress on that wood that you couldn't see, and I didn't see, but it was a direct line right down through to the bench. So it just worked its way over and just, oh man, it was a mess. So I ended up, to fix it, I had to add another 1/4-inch piece of hardboard on top of my bench, so. Plastic's good. Don't forget the plastic.
All right, we're coming up on 5 minutes, Dennis. Now this has got some air bubbles in it, but don't worry about that. Those will all dissipate.
So we want to do you want some blue pigment, or are you just going to, you probably want blue pigment with a little bit of that Maui?
Is that the deep blue?
Well, it's the deepest that I have.
Yeah, I think that's what we were going to go for. So one thing we're going to do two pours. So we're going to mix like a deep blue with some metallic. We're going to pour it in, and then we're going to mix some white with some white metallic, and we're going to drizzle that on the edges. Now, you would think that when you pour that, it would kind of stay the way it looks. This stuff will change over the next day and a half.
Yep.
So that one over there, I don't know if you guys looked at it, but we poured a little yellow line through the middle, and that disappeared in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, he thought it was going to stay.
It didn't. So you just got to be happy with what you get. I mean, it's all experimental and okay. So you can put as much of this in as you want, but just remember you can't take it out. So start with a drop or two.
Go easy.
Yeah, and just kind of see what you got. The other thing, those coasters over there, those blue ones, those don't have any pigment in them at all, right?
No, that's all, because the metallics will add some color to it. And I'm what I've been doing personally a lot is a bit more with just the metallics and no pigment, because I like that. It's a little bit more translucent. So, whereas this has got pigment in it, and it's still translucent, but just not as much. Those coasters, that is all by way of, it's probably that Maui that we're using there.
So you can kind of see just by looking through here, I won't bring it over since it's liquid, but there's a lot of color in it just from a couple drops.
Yeah, I wouldn't do any more.
So then we'll go to the Maui.
Here you go.
Oh, you got it right there.
You know, do everything in moderation. I mean, people ask me, well, how much metallic do you use? Well, you just do it, and there you got it.
I'm just going to do about
That's
that
it
much.
right there.
Yep.
You know, obviously, the more volume you're mixing to begin with, the more you'll put in there, but just go easy to begin with, and you can kind of see it, and you'll decide whether you like it or you don't. And if you overdo it, then that's just exactly the look you were looking for. You know,
If you guys want to come up and look real quick, you can kind of see the metallics starting to mix in. Sorry, that overhead camera went off again.
Did it?
It did. But you can kind of see it's really starting to look silvery. That's just from that little scoop.
A little bit goes a long way.
It does.
Nice.
Step up one step. There you go.
yeah.
There you go. Pretty cool, huh? And we forgot to do it again. If you're going to pour multiple colors, take some of your resin and epoxy that's mixed up, pour it in another bucket first, so you got something to mix that
Oh, that's
second
right. So
color.
we have to pour it.
That's okay.
And while I'm thinking about it, the cleanup on this is pretty much once we're done, or once you're done, if you've got any left over, I usually, when I'm at home, I just paper towels, I wipe it out as best I can, and it goes in the trash can. And then once I've got the majority of that out, then I'll put some hot water and dish soap in there, clean it around, and I go outside and I pitch it. And then depending on how good I feel about that, sometimes I do it one more time and then pitch it. And then they'll do it a third time, and then I'll pour that down the drain. Because soap and water will clean it up. And the silicone here, which I just happened to find in Target one time, is it won't stick to that. It'll come right out.
So I'm gonna mix up another batch, Dennis, if you wanna pour the big part. You guys can come up and watch
Yep,
if
you
you
come
want.
up
Let me
and-
get close.
Watch me muck it up. I'm gonna pinch that as best I can.
Kinda neat with that end submerging there.
That's wicked.
One thing too is that tape will change the color a little bit. So when you get it out and you pop it out and finish it, it will lighten up a little bit, but that red shows through and makes it look a little deeper.
Yeah, it
than
does.
is.
For some reason, blue seems to do that more. It seems to be, it has more, that red tape has more effect on blue than it does some of the other colors. So we had some left over, but that was kind of by design because I didn't want to have to mix more and have you guys waiting on it. So, but again, as you do this, you're going to figure out, it won't take you very long to figure out how to figure out milliliters and how much you need. That's a pretty good pour right now,
Yeah.
but you just wait. Yeah, it's going to seep over somewhere.
Okay, so we're gonna take a little bit of white pigment. We're actually gonna hit this pretty hard.
So I've got a little heat gun here. It's just like a Home Depot thing or something. I'm not a cook, but works for good for epoxy. And I'm going to torch those bubbles. And you don't need the flame, you just need the heat.
Yeah, that stuff's gonna stay good for hours.
And this is going to happen over probably next 2 or 3 hours anyway. But probably what you saw there is about as many as there's ever going to be. The next time there'll be a few less and a few less and a few less. So you want to do it in an area that's, fairly non-traffic because you don't want to bump this. And you don't want dust and stuff settling on it.
Looks like it's pretty level though. It's a good pour.
And I know that at some point I'm my own worst enemy sometimes. I'm gonna pour a little more, and then you know that's gonna happen. You poured too much.
But it seems easy.
If it does come over a bit, it's still easy to sand off, right?
Yeah, yeah. The only wood that I would say that's not necessarily the case would be, I've done some spalted maple stuff before, and that spalted maple is so soft that it just, it leaches into the wood, and you can't sand that away. So you know what that is? That's character.
One thing you
Beautiful.
One thing you can do though, if you don't want it to leach into like a softwood into the edges, is pre-coat those edges and then let that harden first.
That would probably be a good idea.
So in other words, you're sealing off all the edges first
Yeah.
and not allowing that epoxy to transfer into the wood so much.
Now, we didn't do that with these, but somebody was talking to me earlier, and I think that if I were doing a table, a real table, where it's gonna be wider and your pour is even wider, I probably would seal those edges before I actually poured the epoxy.
Now, one thing that you want to think about too is that he's got these hold down sticks running this way. Sometimes that makes it difficult when you're going to do a pour because you got to go either across the tops of these. So if the sticks are running this way, sometimes that's a little easier.
It would be,
Here.
yep, I didn't even think about it when I did
Well, we did
those.
it on our
Yeah,
other one. We
yeah.
switched it over, but so what I'm
So you
saying
understand
is,
what he's saying? That's
Right,
all.
if I go
yeah.
to pour this, I've got to deal with these sticks, and I might be tempted just to pour right across the top of them. To be honest.
Well, you can do that too. It's
I don't
going to
know
create
how-
some
I
sort
don't
of.
know
I don't
about
know
that.
how
I
this
don't know
is
about
gonna
that.
go. I'm just gonna get a little creative here.
And this is part of the fun of the whole process, because you don't know what you're going to get. You think you know.
Well, this is definitely changing it.
Could be totally fun.
It could be really bad.
Well, if it turns out bad, then we'll put it in your office.
There you go.
The one thing is you truly can't sculpt it. You really can't. You just can do what we're doing and you hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can sort of try to do this.
And I
a
do
little
that.
bit, but it usually
It won't stay that
hold.
way.
But it'll look pretty for a little bit.
The only time that's ever worked is on this table right here. Right there where that security table is. See that white streak in there? He, after we poured that, he took a little drop, one drop of white pigment, and he dropped it in, literally dropped it in there. And he took a skewer stick, and he just drugged that way. And that's the way it looked. And I said, well, it can't stay that way. It just won't stay that way. And son of a gun. We came in the next morning, and it was still like that. It's the only time I've ever seen that. They just don't cooperate like that.
And Ecopoxy says do not do that, because what you're doing is you're putting pigment in and not epoxy that's been mixed. So it may not set up. So we got lucky on that one.
We did. That's another thing. I mean, because I told the morning class, and I'll tell you the same way, is this stuff is where the SPR will set up much quicker. So you maybe have a couple hours if you needed to add more. If it shrank down or it ran or whatever, and you needed to add more, you'd still have maybe a couple hours on SPR. You could do that. But I've done pours where it really, whatever, it shrunk down quite a bit. And I thought, son of a gun. So I had some left over like I did here, and that maybe 2 hours later, I'm pouring more epoxy that I've mixed into that mold. And you've got, with Flowcast, it seems like I was able to do that even 6 hours later. Ecopoxy, he slapped my hand. You can't do that. You don't do that. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. He was pretty adamant about it. And he's telling me that you've poured it, it's curing at a certain rate in this mold, and now you've got this container over here that's this big, that's that deep, that's curing at a different rate. So now you're mixing two things together that aren't curing at the same rate. Says you can't do that. So I don't do it anymore, but I did do it and it worked. And with this Flowcast, you're going to notice that probably 16 hours from now, still looks like this. You know, don't touch it. No. Because it's too late. At 16 hours, you don't want to be messing with it. I did that one time, and so I'm speaking from experience. In that I poured, and I was pretty taking care of my bubbles and everything, and then it's like 16 hours later, and I'm down the basement, and I look, and shoot, there's a bubbles, just a little group of bubbles. And I thought, crap. Well, I went ahead and took the old torch and I'd started you don't need the flame, you just need the heat. So I took that, and the moment I did that, I saw it. And it was like, it's like if you were to torch a piece of paper with just the heat, and you know how it turns brown before it actually flames? That's just what that did. It just, you could see that spot where I torched it, and oh crap. And it's like it turned it from glossy to dead flat, is what it did. And I thought, oh boy. So, it's a done deal. What are you going to do? So I sanded it. It ended, I was lucky. I got rid of it by way of sanding. But that may or may not be the case all the time.
You'll also see online where they will use heat guns and stuff like that. That will work, but it does sort of, it's wind on it.
Yeah.
So these little torches like you have are really a nice way to go.
Yeah. Just hand me a stick, will you? Let's just drag that a little more.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
You sure you want to do that?
I do. This will break it up. Hopefully it'll-
You happy now?
Well, I should have done the other side too, but I didn't.
Get them to match here.
Really, the truth of the matter is whatever I'm doing doesn't really matter. Because it's gonna do whatever it wants to do. And then you just gotta be happy with it. Because it's a one only. There ain't nobody doing this like this again. They're all different. Which is the fun of the whole thing.
So now we just got to wait 3 days.
And this will take a good, it'll be a minimum of they say 3 days.
Long
72
time
hours.
sitting here, you got plenty of hot dogs?
We do.
Yeah.
I got plenty in the fridge. Enough to survive.
So it'll take a full 3 days for this to set up. I would not take this mold off before 72 hours. Like I said, those smaller tables, like this one here, I could have pulled this out at 48 hours. It was done.
And then as coasters, even quicker.
No, they're gonna. When I do my coasters, I actually do 3 boards at a time. They're 17 inches long, so that I've got saw curve to cut off.
I got you.
And so, I usually do them in 3/4 inch stock, and then I'll resaw it. So it's going to take the 72. It'll take 48 hours anyway. And if I were just pouring like I wanted my coasters, I just didn't want to resaw. So I'm going to cut them maybe 3/8 of an inch and then sand it down to 1/4 inch or whatever. That would probably take 72 hours, because it's like the less you pour, the longer it takes to cure. And that has to be like some chemical reaction going on there that I don't understand.
Well, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Backwards.
you would think so,
Yeah.
but I think it has to do with the amount of volume for the heat generated. So, but again, I'm not a scientist. Hi. What did I miss? What did we miss?
I don't know. Do we have any questions out there?
What kind of something to put on it to make it food safe or anything, or is it strictly no food or anything on it?
Well, a couple of people have asked, can you do a cutting board with it? Well, there's pros and cons to cutting boards. The biggest problem is that you're cutting on it and you're going to degrade that surface, and obviously you're digesting a certain amount of epoxy there. But so you could put like a UV epoxy over it or something. But yeah, as far as it could be like a cheese board or something like that, or a snack tray.
That one over there.
Right.
Well, that one there is, that's just satin gel finish, because I like that so well. It's just easy for me. But, after 30 days, that's plenty cured. So you could put a cheese and crackers on that, and You just don't want to cut on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not designed to be cut on it, because you're gonna cut into it and scratch it, and that's forever. So,
I think the only other thing is think about, when you're pouring this, I don't want to say you should over pour, but you don't want to under pour either, because it is going to drop a little bit because it's going to go find all those corners. Well, obviously, the more it drops, the more surface you got to remove to get it flat. And we've talked back and forth. The one that we made, I did run through the planer. Now, there's pros and cons to that. When I did it, I took just a tiny amount out. It took like 10 passes, to just shave it off. And it planed fine, but he planed one and it nicked his blades pretty good.
all 3 blades.
Yeah. So,
Blade what?
It nicked all 3 blades just in that first pass, and it actually nicked them all in the same place. But I could never get those blades adjusted, offset so that the scratch went away. So I don't plane mine, but that's just from my experience. You might not have that same experience, because it would sure be nice if you could plane it.
Yeah.
yeah. This table that we did over here, though, it was a little under. And basically, we just took a pencil, went across the whole thing. Start with like a good 80 grit, don't go finer than that. Maybe even 60 grit if you got to really take it down. Go over it, mark it with a pencil again, go over it again, just keep working it down, and then you can start going to 80 and 100 once you start flattening out. And it's doable. You can
Yeah.
do it.
Now, on mine, because I have a drum sander, so I have a 16 to 32, so I use that. And that's why most of my stuff is under 16 inches, because I like to be able to just do that. When I do that, I usually keep an 80 grit on that all the time. And one of the things I do is we went ahead and knocked this last piece off that base so you could see it. But had I been at home doing this, I would have knocked the 4 sides off. Then I would have run it through the drum sander while it was still attached to that base, because that's a flat surface. And then once that top was sanded, then I would take it off that base and then flip it over and run that through. And then I've got it sanded. So then, now you've got this piece sanded to 80 grit. And then it's to the table, bench, and that 80 grit, it scores it pretty good, you know what I mean? So I usually start my sanding process at 60 grit. And I do what Kim has always suggested, is that, and I sand that pencil lead off, and then and it usually takes about 2 or 3 passes on 60 grit. Bless you.
Thank you.
And then, and I usually keep that 60 grit until those lines are all but gone in that epoxy. Then I go into the 80, 100, 120, 150, 180, up to 220, and then something 320. And I don't skip grits. Something like this can probably take a couple hours to sand it. So, and then a lot of times, like on this is actually the first table I ever poured. And that's another thing you didn't say that. If you've not done epoxy pours before, and you're thinking about an epoxy pour, man, start small. The one thing you don't want to do is get a nice slab out of the store, or a slab of walnut that came out of your grandfather's timber that you want a table made out of, and then start with that. I learned a lot by doing these small ones, and it turned out it's actually my favorite table, actually. But I learned quite a bit, and I learned process a little bit better. And so I did those 2. I did that one, another one the same size, and then I went and did the sofa table that I originally was intending to do right away. I thought, I had in my mind up, I'm going to do this sofa table. So I get the plank, I cut it to length, I got the mold made, and less than 24 hours from going, and I'm thinking, Dennis, what are you thinking? Act like you got a brain. So I thought, well, I can't do this. I just can't do this. So I took the cut off from that plank. It was another 3 foot left, so I cut it in about 18 inches, and that's what those became of those 2 tables. Is by realizing I didn't want to start big, I should start small. So my takeaway would be start small and sure tape.
It's the Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail. It really is. I'm telling you. I've seen, and I bet you have too. You've seen YouTube videos where they're pulling that stuff out of that mold and it isn't going well.
Yeah, and you've
You
also
don't
seen the
want that.
videos where they've used melamine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that does not work. Don't do that.
Not as well as you think it would.
No.
So it's the best $12 you're ever going to spend. I guarantee you.
Well, and it popped off that mold pretty easy. I mean, pretty clean.
That was his, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it wouldn't have been clean if the paint wouldn't have had lids on.
Right. Good point.
Yeah, I could babble on longer, but
Can you buff it? What kind of buffing can you do to it after it's been done?
well, it's funny you would say that.
Okay. We've got
Because
these.
when I started this, I didn't know what I was doing. I only knew I wanted to do it. So I sanded that to, I think it was, I'm going to say 400 with the orbital. And then I thought, you know, and I'm kind of reading and hearing what people say, and so I thought, well, it needs to be polished then. So I got it, you know, I got a 500,000, 2,000, and 4,000 these mesh pads.
Fits on your random orbit sander.
And I put it on my random orbit sander, and I tried to as best I can to just hit the epoxy and not the wood so much, because I didn't think it didn't need it. So, but I didn't want to cut the pad down to, you know, cheap for that. So I did that. Then I thought, well, what would happen if I did some wet sanding? Because somebody said wet sanding would be good. So I tried it. And all I did is squirt some water on the surface, and then I took another one of these at 500 and 1,000, and I just polished it. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I did anything. I can't tell you that I saw the difference between doing it and not doing it, and I don't do it anymore.
I mean, if you wanted a really shiny surface, just polyurethane. You know, it'll take polyurethane just fine, just like you'd finish wood.
Right.
So, and you can polish that then too if you want.
Yeah.
So a little more predictable.
I was just wondering if the speed and the heat that it would create over the epoxy would do.
It didn't have nothing like that. But then I mean, I had my orbital running probably, if it's 1 to 5, it was probably on 4. I mean, it was not quite high speed, but no, there was no type of heat generation or anything like that to worry about.
Okay.
Where's the red tape come from? What is it?
I don't know what it is. Did I tell you, did I mention the whole epoxy tuck tape thing?
Yeah.
Ecopoxy, did I tell that? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Where
just
do you
called
get it?
Sure Tape.
We have this back
Oh.
there, yeah. In my academy, test out some of that Ecopoxy tape, because we were thinking about carrying that here. But I tell you, after I used it, I just thought, this is way better. And it actually, the money, it's actually less expensive than Ecopoxy tape would have been. And it's way better in my mind. Because again, I do reuse my molds. Some of those can last quite a while, you know. But sometimes I have to redo the sides. But the base, I can use that many times before I.
Yeah, the nicest thing about that tape is
Pitch it.
it's got some thickness to it, so it pulls off easy. Doesn't tear off like you were talking
Yeah.
about.
You almost got to cut it with a knife, though. It doesn't tear very well. So it's just
Stretchy.
X-Acto knife or something. But man, oh man, oh man, oh. It's the
Yeah,
stuff.
I know.
Yeah,
Nice.
good stuff.
If you're gonna do any of this, man,
Made for?
What's it originally made for, you mean? Why they would make this kind of tape?
I don't know.
It's just,
It's just a gift from God, as far as I'm concerned. See, I did not say that, so that doesn't count.
And we do have little kits back there too. We've tried to put together some pre-made live edge kits back there. So if you ever want anything when you come in, let us know and we'll cut you some small pieces off of the slab or something that you can take home and try.
If you go back, if you're back there by the Ecopoxy, just look up. Because he's got several pieces cut, and that's what the intention of that was, is so that you could,
Do a small project.
yeah. And hopefully, at least one of these will end up back there so that you'll visually see, and oh, that's what these are for. So that's where you should see this in a couple, 3 weeks. 3 weeks,
Not next weekend?
not next weekend. So
You're not that fast, huh?
I'm not. But it's a lot of fun. If you're into it, start small. And I haven't used any of the other epoxies, so all I know is the Ecopoxy. And it's really nice stuff.
Yeah, it's been a good brand.
For a long time, we were the only one that carried it in Iowa. But I do think that a couple other stores now have it. But
Yeah, we even carry one now that's solid white, which is kind of interesting. So another look. We haven't tried that yet. We'll have to do that.
it's a I don't know what exactly they call it. They call it pure white,
Snow White.
Snow White. But it's pre-mixed, and that's what it's going to be. What it's going to be. I mean, if we wanted white, we could make white, but
Yeah,
kind of
you
white
could
are we
use
making? 'Cause
you
how
could
many
use a solid white in it and then put a couple of streaks of color in it and mix it in.
Yeah.
It might be kind of interesting to try.
I would say on the pigment thing, is I did have one fail. I was helping a friend of mine, and basically we were doing. He wanted to do sort of a charcuterie board type thing, and he wanted to do a Hawkeye thing. So I have a shape of origin, so I routed the shape of the Iowa around the perimeter of the board at 1/8 of an inch wide and 1/4 inch deep. And then I routed, I think it's called Herky Hawk, or the Hawkeye logo thing. I routed that in the center of that. And then we were gonna fill the state of Iowa with black. And then Herky was gonna be gold, so yellow. And I used SPR, I know I must have. But he wanted a yellow, so I'm mixing it. I figured out how much epoxy I needed, then I started putting pigment in. And I'm stirring it, and I'm thinking, I think it ought to be a little more yellow. Maybe it should be more yellow. So I put in another drop, and it stirred. And then maybe it'll be a little more yellow with another drop. So I put another drop in. And I was actually stirring it in probably one of these. So it wasn't very much epoxy. And I ended up putting, I'm guessing 6 or 7 drops in there, and it wasn't getting any yellower. I mean, I guess yellow is just yellow at some point. So I went ahead and poured it, and it would never set up. It got to Pillsbury Doughboy consistency, so it wasn't a liquid. It wouldn't run anymore, but it would not harden. And I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing I put in too much pigment for the volume of epoxy I was trying to pour. So
Interesting.
yeah, I guess things happen. just, I guess my point is just kind of try to keep some of that stuff in mind. I mean, if you do, especially if you're doing little pours. I've had people come in and talk about, well, I'm wanting to do just this little thing on the top of a jewelry box lid, you know. And I try to emphasize to them that it needs to be at least 1/4 inch deep, and be careful on how much epoxy or metallic that you mix in there, because you don't have much volume there. So
you gotta have enough epoxy for it to cure, basically.
that, and then I'm sure that once I put that pigment in, I changed that ratio a little bit too much for the amount
Sure.
of volume of that I was trying to pour. So anyway, I've had I've had a lot of success, but I've had my failures too, and now I've shared them with you. And let me tell you, it sucked to see that workbench
Oh, I bet.
covered in epoxy.
Where'd you use that spray again?
Once I tape everything, because I tape all the edges to these pieces in the base, I tape all that individually, and then I cut it with a knife, so it's nice and neat. And then I screw those, I screw through the base into the sides, so now I have tape all around in the inside of my mold. Then I make sure I get all my tape around here, around the perimeter. Make sure you get those screw holes covered. And once all that's done, and before I put the lumber in the mold, I spray that with this. And it's just an added layer. Maybe it isn't necessary, but you saw how easy it was for him to literally pop that out. Well, easy's good. So that's where I used it, Jim.
Yeah, and it pops right off.
It probably would have come off without that. It just come off better with it. So, but let me just say this too. Then when you spray that silicone, you probably ought to put a drop cloth or something, because I always just set it on the floor and then I go.
It's a
Well,
slick
my
floor.
basement floor is concrete, but it's fairly rough. But in the shop, when we were getting ready for this, I thought, well, I gotta spray these, so I just put them on the floor back in the shop, and well, there's about that much square space back in the shop where you gotta watch.
It's an ice skating rink.
Because it's pretty slick. It's polished concrete back there, and so it's pretty slick right now. So just be advised of that. So that's about all the hiccups I have for you. Pete's got more, but
No, I think the biggest thing is just prep. Just make sure you got all your pieces ready to go, and the fun part is just giving it a try and see what you come up with.
the other thing I guess I didn't mention, but it's kind of obvious, that I try to size these. I always build. I know what the inside dimensions I want. So then once that mold's built, after it's built, then I'll cut these to length, because I always want that to just sit in there as tight as it can without damaging the tape as it goes in. So the less room you have for epoxy to run to, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, you guys can come up and take a look at it. It's changed again. It's getting kind of interesting.
It's going to be fun. Well, I hope you guys will give it a try sometime. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and we're here, so you can all, ask questions.
When you saw that, does that plastic chip easily? Like if you cut the edges off?
It will, I use a woodworker too in my saw, so that's what I'm using to cut off. And it will chip just a little bit. So you'll need to treat that edge in some fashion, in some way, a little bit.
You may have to break the edge a little bit with some
Yeah,
sandpaper.
yeah, and I always sand the edges just the way I sand the top, so it's polished.
Yeah.
It actually cuts better than West Epoxy does.
Cuts better what?
It cuts better than West Epoxy does.
Oh,
It's
West
more
Epoxy.
like a plastic than West Epoxy is. So
So pour it and don't touch it.
Well, that's, like I said, this is gonna be water, and for about the next 12 to 14 hours minimum. It won't look like it's doing anything, but it is. But after about 16 to 18 hours, you're gonna start to see a difference, and you don't wanna touch it, because you know what you're gonna do? You're gonna put a fingerprint in it. And then you know, that's there.
That's an artist's signature.
Yeah, well, okay. And I was telling somebody, I think earlier, that if there's a bubble that you didn't catch, that maybe showed up in hour 12 or whatever, you know, you can't eliminate it anymore, you just gotta live with it. And it'll either sand away, or I was doing a river table for my daughter, and it happened. I had like a spot there, and it wasn't a very big spot, but it was like 4 bubbles together. And son of a gun.
Be more like before.
So I went ahead and I thought, what's gonna sand away? Well, it didn't sand away. It sanded half the bubble, but didn't sand the other half. And you know what that is? That's a bear track. And I say that because when I poured hers, she got the heavy juice of metallic. So in hers, it's really heavy on swirls and stuff. It looks like frozen water.
Would you ever want to put anything over it to keep like the flies and stuff off?
sure could.
You could.
And it wouldn't.
You just don't want to dip it into it. is
No.
all.
Right, right, right.
Like if you put plastic over it, you'd want some fairly heavy plastic to where it's,
I
not
mean,
dipping
when it's
into
clamped
it.
up like this, I would.
Yeah.
You could drape.
Yeah, you sure could. It's not a bad idea, especially if you don't want a fly to land in it.
Yeah.
'Cause
We
you
had
know that
guys-
happens.
We had a guy this morning talk about it. Seems like every time he
Every time you
pours, he gets a
varnish.
fly.
Get woke up somewhere.
I haven't
somewhere
had
somewhere
that
going,
experience
"Yeah,
yet, but I have had a bubble, and I've had a
Did you tell him
speck of dust of that.
Did you tell him what ended up over in that one?
No, I didn't. He's eating a hot dog. He's eating a hot dog, and he's standing over the dang thing. And all of a sudden, there's a chunk of bread, and I gotta dig it out.
I think it would have sank, but
See, there's a little speck of dust in there now. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can't get that out of there.
Sometimes you'll get hair in there.
it's kind of interesting. I put a lot of metallic in that white, Dennis.
Yeah?
I have a feeling that metallic floats a little more. The more metallic you put in it, the more it stays up on the top. Because this isn't like going down and boiling like the other one did. It's actually staying a little bit more on these edges.
That's neat.
So I wonder if that metallic actually, there's some buoyancy to it or something.
You know, and that's another thing I didn't mention, for those who remain, is you want to stir that metallic pretty good too, because it will clump,
You're right.
and sometimes that might be a look, but probably not. But, I mean, I've had it clump, and then I call that, well, that's what I wanted. But just be advised that it will clump a little bit, and you want to break it up as you're stirring.
That's kind of cool where this piece
Mm-hmm.
goes under.
Yeah,
'cause
he
you'll be able
did
to
that
see
on
it.
purpose,
Yeah.
he wanted to.
It's a shallow spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat. That's
That was one of the nice things about this.
You need to
little
put a
table.
buoy right at this end.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Little red buoy.
Yeah.
Go to the Petco and get some rocks from.
Oh, yeah.
From
Fish tank rocks?
Fish rocks from fish tanks.
Yeah.
But scatter some rocks stuff around there.
The first group we had this morning, one of their son went out and got some gravel from their garden or something.
Oh, yeah.
Area, and that's what he did. He put a bunch of rocks in the bottom and then poured right over the top of the whole thing. So you could do some from Schoolhouse Beach.
nice.
You know,
Get our
that would be a
characters
lot of
out,
fun.
like play some
I
D&D.
think if you were gonna do that though, you'd wanna pour a shallow pour, let that start to set up, and then drop that rock and stuff in there, and then pour over that. Otherwise, it's
actually
gonna
seen some of
sink,
the
and you're
YouTube
gonna either
videos.
sand it or you're gonna,
I've actually seen some of them YouTube videos where them guys are making them the big giant tables and doing that very
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
on the pours, putting that stuff down in there. It would let it look cool.
Well, that one, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen the one with the Millennium Falcon and the stormtroopers and everything? He created like a Star Wars scene. And what he did was he pre-epoxied, he poured like a 1/4 inch, like you said, of the epoxy, stuck all that in there, and then let that set. And then once that's all set, then he did his pour over the top, and that way the stuff didn't float to the surface, And,
Right, yeah.
you know, and the Ecopoxy guy told me about if you wanted to do something like that, let's say you're gonna do that, you could pour a shallow pour, let that harden for, he said about 10 hours. I don't know if they were talking about SPR at the time, but he said you want that to be like Pillsbury, I use that again, Pillsbury Doughboy. Put that rock in, and as long as that epoxy is still at that Pillsbury Doughboy stage, you could actually pour again
oh, really?
right then and keep
Yeah,
on
because it's
pouring.
not completely fully cured, so it would bond.
But if
It looks
it's,
good without-
if it's beyond that Pillsbury Doughboy, then you need to wait the full 48 or 72 hours or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I've not tried that yet, but one of these days I kind of wouldn't mind doing something like that.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Because you can get like miniature fish from like Hobby Lobby.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
put them,
Thanks
put
so
them
much.
down in there, and then take like a small pan or a small wire and put them down into the
Sure.
doughboy, and then pour the rest of it on there, and we'll look like fish in that.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I saw one where they did like frogs and
Yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Didn't you say somebody asked you if they could put LED lights in?
Well, I've seen that done. I've watched, there's videos out there.
Really?
On that. Yeah.
It just seems like a,
And what?
It's fine until they go out.
It was a guy.
you know, those coasters, they're as much work as this.
Yeah. So you're doing the coasters in 3/4 inch slabs,
Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't.
and then you just resaw.
Uh-huh. You get a little more bang for your buck that way. It just seems like instead of being, I do 12, I get 24 out of
Maybe
it.
something a little bit larger.
But it's like, it's still, it's more, it's just work. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you.
retired. Work don't
I'm just
bother me
telling you
anymore than I
that
do.
those coasters, they take time.
Yeah.
Well, as you're getting into it, just, always ask. I may not have an answer for you, but I can sure try to help you.